So, hello everyone. Hello and welcome. Welcome. My name is Theodora. I'm a manager at EY, based in Cyprus currently. And today, together, we're going to look at the future of work. So, I'm pretty sure many of us have heard some pickup lines like AI and some different things that are happening around the world and that are shaping the future of work. So, we're going to talk about, like, for an hour together today about what does the future of work look like and what are some of the trends coming up. So, I hope you tune in and let's get started. So, the way that I want to start today is we're looking about what's after, what's next. Okay, so we're looking at the trends of the future of work, but also because there's things that we know are going to happen and there's things we yet don't know that are going to happen, and that is why the question is what's after, what's next, because the future is here and tomorrow's workforce changed yesterday. Okay, so that's a quote I go by, and the point is that we changed already and we're facing changes every single day, and it's going in a very big rate, much different than what we're used to or what generations before us were used to. And so that's what we're looking at today. Those changes that happened will happen, and just look at it together and see how can we better prepare for this future of work. So to kick things off, I just want to put a video that kind of summarizes few of the things and the trends that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so let's look at it together.
We are on the verge of a profound transformation. Work and life will soon be reorganized on a massive scale. For many decades, our lives have been governed by frameworks that came from the factory model of the last industrial revolution. Regularity, uniformity, and linear progression formed our systems of work and organized our lives. Education dominated a person's youth in preparation for work, which progressed in a linear fashion to retirement. Our professional and social framework was built around a 40-hour, 5-day work week. But the next industrial revolution is here, redefined by digital disruption and artificial intelligence. Old norms and structures are already starting to unravel. They will soon be replaced altogether to accommodate flexible modes of work and new rhythms of life with fluid boundaries. This is the unbounded future, where people flow back and forth between work, retirement, and education. They will manage their lives as a portfolio, rebalancing a mix of work, leisure, and learning based on where they are in their journey. Longer lifespans and accelerating disruption will require learning to become a lifelong process and take place on the job in order to facilitate not only multiple jobs during a lifetime, but many careers. People may retire young or take a sabbatical to retrain and then return to work later in life, meaning that retirement will look radically different, both in terms of its timing and how it is funded. But this new way of life also poses new risks to society and businesses. While some workers will be empowered by the unbounded future of work, others will be displaced by disruption and automation. companies must consider what responsibility they have to individuals and to society at large to facilitate change that is humane and sustainable. Businesses must prepare for the unbounded workforce and establish new models for learning that are continuous, flexible, and focused on soft skills. And they will need to redefine what it means to save for retirement with new forms of financial planning. In order to thrive, companies must transform themselves to reimagine workspaces that span the physical and virtual, and empower workers with the flexibility to manage their life portfolios. Discover how EY.
So, um, there's a lot of things that the video poses, and is like a nice summary of what we're going to talk today together within less than an hour or so. So let's take it one by one from the things that the video said and are presenting, and let's see what's changing. Okay. So I want to start with something that many of you may know, which is the great resignation that's happening. For the people that don't know, this is like a new trend, or I don't think it's that new anymore, where we see a huge number of resignations. And there's also the trend of quiet quitting, where employees maintain a specific level of performance until they are ready to get out of the organization and they don't give any active signs. So, what does this great resignation, what does quiet quitting, what does all of those trends that we see mean? Let's see. So first of all, something that's very important is that more than 20%, there's a 20% increase, more than 20% actually, between people aged 30 and 45 years who are resigning. Okay. So the great resignation and generally this trend is not something that's happening only to new generation. Millennials are taken by it and are doing it, are taking this practice a lot. And that says a lot about the ways we're looking at our roles and the ways that traditional work has been shaped, and that is not going to happen anymore. So the other thing that is really important to mention is that there's there are some specific industries that are affected. So as you can see, health care and tech, if I take you down here, are the most affected industries, which see the higher level of resignations. And there's also industries, especially healthcare, that there's a gap right now and they need a lot of people. And there's also some specific jobs who have a gap right now. So if we look at some of the data, I think there was something like 7 million vacancies, but only 5 or 6 million people who were looking for jobs. Why do we still have people who can't find a job? Why do we still have people who, while there are jobs out there, that's because the matching is not there. You might be on a different industry, you might be on a different profession, or there might be professions like healthcare or some technical services that are declining in terms of people's interest to go into them, while others, like being a lawyer or some professional services, are getting more demand and people studying to go to them, and that's what brings that kind of disruption that I'm talking about. Also, it's very important to see that 122% of an employee's annual salary is the estimate cost for an employer for finding and training a replacement. And this is another thing that's shifting and changing in our world today, is that so far we're seeing employers having the power to decide who they're hiring, and the power to, if you want, hire and fire however they like. However, that is changing, and we're seeing a shift in that power going to the employees and to the candidates. What does that mean? It means that nowadays you'll see you need to choose your employer as well. And I work at recruitment as well as other HR services. And we see a lot of people where we are now thinking, is the candidate going to accept the position? While in the past we were thinking, will the employer accept the candidate for the position? So it's another thing that's changing, and that is something that's affecting a lot the way things are done, and it's going to affect the future of work. So other things that we see on the screen is that there's a need for more flexibility for different working conditions. There's people who feel stressed and overworked, and we see that problem being increased. And something that's very important is that is not just the younger generations joining in the market, it's also millennials who are now the biggest percentage of managers and will be the biggest percentage of managers, and they are facing that as well. So I just wanted to put some data out there for you to just get that started. So something that's very interesting to me is that a politician scientist and former US ambassador to Russia, he said that in retrospect, all revolutions seem inevitable. Beforehand, all revolutions seem impossible. So before they happen, before the changes that we're facing right now were to happen, they seemed impossible. And if you go back and think at the four industrial revolutions that we are currently at the fourth one, if we think of all the industrial revolutions that happened, many people beforehand thought that it was impossible, but after they happened, everybody realized that they were just inevitable. And that is where it brings us today to AI, which is the inevitable kind of thing. But we are still at the point where we don't know where the future will lead us when it comes to AI. We have some predictions, but there's still a lot of things in terms of what will actually happen. Um, and to some extent, some things may seem impossible until we see them crystallize and happen. So, what are some of the main forces that are driving the future megatrends? Most people would say it's technology, but we forget that along with technology comes the demographics, the geopolitics, and sustainability. So it's very, very important to consider demographics. We have people for the first time, we have five different generations working in the workplace together, and generations that are very, very different. They have very big gaps in terms of mindsets or what they need or how they work. But there's also the globalization, which brings different cultures and different people working together, either under the same roof or even remotely. So you could be working. I'm in Cyprus. I'm working with people who are in Norway. I'm working with people who are in India, and we're working into different time frames currently together. And those demographics are very important in terms of how the future will be shaped. And many times we forget that it's a blend between those two and the technology that we see today that will bring and shape the future of work, because these two things mean some specific things in terms of how we're going to work and what skills we're going to need in the future, which are changing because of this. So, also some key facts to consider. Europe's workforce, for example, is projected to contract by 25% within the next 2 decades, while fertility rates drop not only by having less kids, but in some cases by having zero kids. Generation Alpha, who are people that were born from 2010 until 2025, will be much, much smaller. And we have the data for that. According to the International Labor Organization data, about a fifth of 15 to 25-year-olds are right now nets. Nets are people who are not currently in education, training, or employment. Okay, so we have a fifth of the 15 to 24-year-olds not being in education, employment, or training currently, and their stress levels are significantly higher than those of millennials when they were their age, and as well as the generations before millennials. Okay. At EY, more specifically, just to give you a data here as well about EY, 127,000 out of the 400,000 people in our workforce today in in general are Gen Z. They were tripled in 3 years. So only in 3 years we had a tripled we it was tripled the number of Gen Zs that came into the workforce. They are part of the demographic change that we're talking about, and it's really going to shape how we work. And we're going to see later today how that's going to happen. The median age, by the way, it's 30. So that tells you a lot as well. Um, Now, in terms of the first 2 points, when we're talking about Europe's workforce, and also when we're talking about fertility rates and all of those things, I want to add to that a few more data just to give you a full picture. So, first of all, currently there are more people above the age of 65 than people below the age of 5. Okay, that means a couple of things. First of all, that says a lot about our social insurances and about our retirement funds and about how the whole system is structured. So, if you have more people above 65 who are not in employment and you have less people below 5, those numbers are going to catch up at some point. And with like medicine and everything becoming so much better, there'll be significant changes that are coming because of these demographics and because of these ages that are changing. The system is not going to be able to support people's retirement funds. Life expansion, as I said, now, the 150 represents the number that right now scientists believe that the person that's going to live 150 years has already been born, which is again a very interesting fact about what is happening and where we are going. So with medicine getting so much better, people living longer, and being more healthy as well, and a system of social insurances and retirement plans that cannot support itself, there is a question, a very big question of what will happen in the future. Will the retirement age change, or at this point, should it change? Based on what is happening and that the system is not going to be able to support itself in a few years in many, many countries. Also, I was reading the other day that Generation Beta, which are kids that are born from 2025 until, I think they're going to be until 2035 or 2040, depending on how things look. They are not going to retire. So the projection for them is that they're not going to retire. Now that may sound scary, but at the same time, it's not going to look like the way that we think. So it's not going to be the traditional 9 to 5. Like the video said, it's not going to be the traditional they work for 60, 70, 80 years, or they work for 40 years and then they stop and they retire and they never work again. These things are going to change. Another very interesting thing is that when I was talking about pensions before, what we can see here is that, for example, in Japan, in 1960, there were 10 workers for every retired person. Okay? So you had 10 employees working, and their social insurances and all of that were supporting the system for one person to be able to retire. That was the ratio. Now, in 2020, not 26, in 2020, it was 10 to 7. So it was 10 workers for 7 people who were retired. Now, that again creates some logistical and financial issues in terms of how will the system be able to support itself. In 2026, because some laws in Japan changed and some of the fertility rates as well changed, it's 10 to 5. So again, compared to the 1960s, it's quite a high ratio. And that again just adds to the fact that what I mentioned already, which is what's going to happen, and how would it look like when it comes to a system that cannot financially support the people who are retiring. Now, in Europe, it was the 2000 in 2006, it was 10 workers to 2.5 retired people, and then by 2050 it's going to be 10 to 5. So it's going to reach where Japan is, basically. Now, to add to this, I want to talk to you about the knowledge and the skills relevance. So, when it comes to knowledge and skill relevance, the half life of a skill, it's 2 to 5 years. Okay. It's closer to 2 years now because we have collected data. I think our data starts from 2018 and goes on until 2026. So it's a blend of the different trends that we see, with the 2026 being the prevailing one. The 2026 is the 2 years. What does that mean for our degrees? What does that mean for our learning? That means that the amount of technical knowledge is doubling every 2 years. So it means that half of the things that students learn in their first year of university will be outdated by the time they reach their third year. Now, that says a lot about the way we are entering the workforce and the way that we are learning. Maybe we need to rethink the way universities are structured, whether universities are the approach that we want to take to be prepared for the future, and whether their structure needs to change. I was actually, right before this video, I was looking at a video of BBC in the UK asking students and young people whether they think that a university degree is worth it, and many of them were saying no, there's apprenticeships, there's people getting jobs without a degree. While others said it's very good because it helps you learn, it teaches you how to learn, and that's not a skill that's going to get outdated. But it really it really tells you a lot when you know that if you have a 4 year degree, because some countries have a 3 year degree and some have a 4 year degree. If you have a 4 year degree, means that what you started learning at the first year of your university, then by the time you graduate, is not going to be applicable anymore, and you're going to need to relearn. So that means that we need to change the way we think about how we learn. And actually, what the data are telling us and what the future skills are telling us is that the ability to learn is going to be one of the highest and most wanted skills any person can have in the future. And to talk about those future skills, it looks like the future will have portfolio of careers. So people will not have one job. They will have kind of like, if you think of an art project or art students where they have to take their portfolios of the different paintings that they did across the years, to showcase them in order for them to get into a university or something like that. I want you to think of your careers like that portfolio of different arts, of different pieces of art. So our careers will change. That means that I may change roles, I may stay within the same role, but that role will not look the same in 2 years. Um, or I might change even a career. I have people who started being teachers in mathematics, joined HR professional services, and are now doing investment for trust funds, and stuff like that. And they changed those three careers within 5 years. So, um, and it's easy to do that. We see people now hiring without caring what your specific degree is, because a lot of jobs you can't learn on the job. So a lot of skills or knowledge, you can acquire it on the job, which means that that gives you the opportunity to go into a job, learn it faster, be able to apply it quicker, and change careers. But that requires the soft skills. So, soft skills like creative problem solving, people management, social intelligence will increase in value. Okay. So, AI will mature, and I will tell you what AI will do later in our discussion. But as AI matures and takes the mundane, everyday, repetitive tasks, because that's the first thing that AI will take and is taking, actually, because this is happening right now. What will be very important for the employees of tomorrow and of today is soft skills. Okay. So, how is your critical thinking? How is your ability to learn and relearn? How is your resilience, your adaptability, your emotional intelligence, your ability to influence and inspire others, to your ability to transfer knowledge, your ability to communicate? All of those skills will become increasingly more important in the future. And this is where the fourth industrial revolution comes in, as I told you. So you had the people who were entrepreneurs. Okay, so we started with entrepreneurship. You had your great great grandfathers, having their own small businesses and making a living out of that. Then you had the revolution where we had, first of all, we have the steam engines and all of that, and then we had the mass production where people became the machines, as you can see in the second picture. And then you had technology coming in, you had IT, you had the computers, which created a different shift. And the future and the fourth industrial revolution that we're seeing right now, which happens with cloud and AI, is our chance to, instead of going, we're going to go a little bit backwards, but a little bit in the future as well. So we have the chance to leave the mundane and robotic things and actually do the creative parts of our work, actually focus on innovating, on creating, on doing, on putting focus on the more people and interesting aspects of our lives and our roles. Now that poses a risk and a threat as well. So if you are a person who was doing a repetitive task their entire career and their entire life, that task is at risk. That task will probably be replaced by AI. That doesn't mean that you're going to be replaced by AI. You need to think of what can I do? How can I evolve to find things that actually may be more interesting than what you were doing so far, because it was needed. That repetitive task was needed and it was your chance to get a job. So now the question is, what would I like to do? Where can I learn and move towards? So these are questions, and these are some of the positive things that could come out of AI, depending on how each of us approaches that as we move along our careers. And because I was talking about the skills of the future, based on the World Economic Forum and their Future of Jobs report of 2025, the 2026 hasn't been out yet. These are the top 10 skills of the future. And if you look into it, I'm putting again other skills here to go up to 26. But if you look at the 10 first skills, you're going to notice something. You're going to notice that they are what we call soft skills. They talk about resilience. They talk about flexibility. They talk about social influence. They talk about creative thinking, about motivation. Yeah, technology literacy is right there and it's going to be needed. But you see how many of the soft skills, the human elements, um, come into play and actually play will be the future. So for me, that's something that it's very interesting and it's very hopeful if you want, because it means that we're putting humans on the center and we're actually looking at the more human side of our work, of our careers, and the way we're going to operate in the future. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to have to know the technology, the AI, and you're not going to have to evolve with it and learn about it. It's just going to look very, very different than it looks like right now. And I'm gonna just shift back for a moment because I couldn't upload my PowerPoint. I'm just gonna shift back to Streamio just so I can see if there's any comments from you guys before I move forward. So let's see. Okay, great. Okay, great. I don't think I see any comments, so I'm just gonna move forward. So, what did we do on this first part? We discussed about the future skills, the future of the demographics that are changing. We talked about how knowledge is going to shift and how some things are going to change, as well as how jobs may change. Now, where I want to focus on the second part is the new generation. Okay, we've heard a lot of things about Gen Z. I am a Gen Z as well. However, I have behavioral indicators of millennials apparently. Um, so let's see what research tells us about this new generation, Generation Z, coming into the workforce. So who is Gen Z, first of all? Okay, so we have Generation depending on what research you see or what area you live in, you can see at the top the generations, and then at the bottom are the different historic, technological, and climate events that have influenced and shaped the different generations. So if we start from here, you have your baby boomers who were born between 1956 and 1971. You have your Gen X, who were born oops, sorry, it's this one, the born 1946 and 1964, then Gen X who were born between 1965 and 1980, then millennials who were born in 1981 and 1996, and then Gen Z come from 1997 or 1999, depending on what research you see, until 2007 or 2010. Depends again on the research. So it's just a couple of years up and down for the generations. And then you have your generation alpha, which are the 2008 to 2025, and we have our first babies of the new generation beta, which are from the end, let's say, or from the beginning of 2025 onwards. So what shaped those generations are some of the historic events that you see below and are color coded. So Gen Z were there for the first iPhone. They were there for Black Lives Matter. They were there for COVID-19 pandemics. Some of them were still at school, some of them at university. That shaped the way they interact. You also had things on the climate spectrum as well. So the sustainable development goals were signed, and they were out there. And then you have generation alpha being placed as the chat GBT generation. Okay, so that's a thing that's a little bit different. Yes, Gen Z have chat GBT, but because it was a recent thing, Gen Alpha are the ones that are going to grow with it instead of Generation Z, and we're going to see in the future how that turns out. And you see, of course, the other generations as well, and what how they were shaped. Now these events are very important in terms of how they shaped what Generation Z believes and how they operate. Okay, so before we go to that, I just want to talk about the Generation Z values. So what do Gen Z value? They care about financial security. Now, what do we mean by financial security? It looks a little bit different than what other generations did. So other generations would they were very into the stability of having a job. They would stay at one job for, from the start of their career to the end of their career. Now, Gen Z want financial security, but it looks more like employability rather than lifetime employment. So they want to know that there will be employable. Okay, they also look for fair pay. They want to know that the companies they're going to work into, they're paying in a fair and transparent way. It's very, very important for them. And it's a reason why they're going to choose organizations or careers many times. Financial and non-financial rewards and benefits as well are very important to them. So they may decide to stay at a job with lower financial rewards if the non-financial rewards and benefits are at a high level, and if the environment and learning as well is at a high level, according to their own needs. Now, non financial rewards and benefits mean a lot of things. It means flexibility, it means your ability to learn, and how many opportunities you have for that. It means things like benefits that we can think like, um, caring for elderly, or if there's any benefits relating to that, kindergartens for your kids, benefits like paid time off if your kid is sick, flexibility in terms of you can work condensed hours, or all of those things. All of those things, they consider them as non-financial rewards, and they actually matter a lot to them. They care about the purpose and meaning at work. They want to know why things are happening. So they want to know, why am I doing this? Where is it going to lead? What does it mean? How does this little tasks relate to the bigger picture of the organization and my work. They want creativity and innovation in their work. They like to be challenged. They like the autonomy so they can work on their own. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be supervised. Um, but it means that they like this level of autonomy. But we need to be careful because that generation may need some help with that sense of autonomy, because at the same time they have high levels of stress and they're going into a workplace that they don't know yet the job. So that means that they need to be a little bit careful when it comes to autonomy, and managers and companies as well need to be careful when they're called to manage them on their everyday work. They care about well-being. So now this one is not something that millennials didn't want as well, or other generations. It's just the generation Z is demanding them in a very in a more strict way. So if they don't have it, they're going to tell you. They're not going to tell you in a nice way, and they're probably going to leave the job for it. Okay? That is the reason why their force is kind of stronger in some organizations, and some generations are feeling their force a little bit more, and that relates to some stereotypes or some words like entitlement, snowflakes, or other things that you may hear about Generation Z. Now, they care about work life integration. They like to know that they would like to know that I can go to my gym, that I can do the things in my afternoon, that work is not the first thing, the first thing that is my priority all the time. They work to live. They don't live to work, and that's very, very important. And they care a lot about mental and physical well-being. Again, if you think about how much the social media has affected them, in the sense that they were connected everywhere, there was a lot of talk about, well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being. That is the reason that we see trends like they drink less alcohol than any other generation, almost half. They have a different sense of, they would hit the gym, and they would care a lot about their physical well-being. So these are things that, even though they were important to other generations, there's a higher importance, and we see it in the ways reflected, um, in the way this generation is living. Now, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They care a lot about respecting and adapting to differing needs. Now, they have what we call systemic empathy. Now, systemic empathy is the fact that we're empathetic about different groups of people. So we're empathetic, and we're asking for inclusions, for people who have disabilities, for people who have kids, for people who are elder, for people who speak different languages. So they are very empathetic in terms of these things and want inclusivity, but you may not experience empathy on the day-to-day basis, on the one-to-one with their colleague. What's the difference? How does that look different? They may want benefits for people who have kids, even if they don't have kids yet. But when it's 5 o'clock and they need to go off work, if they see you still working and you're asking them for work, they may tell you, no, it's 5 o'clock, I have to go off. So you may feel the empathy as a systemic thing rather than an everyday experience. But there are ways which we can help this generation be integrated and develop that empathy. And this is where I'm telling you that soft skills are coming to play a very, very important role. Now we have technology. They care about access, not ownership. So they don't care if they are the owners of the latest technology. They want to know that they can access it. So they want to know that they will be able to access latest AI and apps, and that their employers are going to be able to offer that. And they're native, which is, I think, very clear. Like they grew up with technology. They know it very well. And they can use it very well, and they're very adaptable, actually. So even if there's new technologies coming in, you're going to see Gen Z being way more productive and way more adaptable to new technologies, quicker than other generations. And they care about communication from different channels. So they use technology What's surprising to many people, or what could be surprising, is that they actually care a lot about teamwork and working in the office sometimes. So Gallup did a research, and actually, it looks like Generation Z want slightly more connection with other colleagues than other generations, or slightly more work from the office than other generations. Now, what does that mean though? They want real connections. It means that they want to come to the office to socialize, to work in teams, to have meetings, to collaborate, to brainstorm. They don't want to come in the office and just sit on a laptop just so that their manager can see their work, or so they can be isolated and just sit on a laptop and do their work that they could be doing home. Okay, so that changes the way we're working. It changes the purposes of why do we need to come to the office, or why do we need to meet. And it asks managers and people to start working in multiple ways. So you will need to be able to give instructions from Teams, from face to face, from a message, from a phone call, from all the different ways and methods that we have to communicate according to what the discussion is about. So it's different if you're going to give instructions, it's different if you're going to give feedback, it's different if you're going to socialize. You need to use different platforms, and that's what Generation Z actually values and does. Now, the authenticity and transparency. They care about honesty. They don't care so much about perfection. If they have a leader, they don't like formal and traditional structures. So the hierarchies that we all have, they don't like them. They may cut them, and they don't have respect, or they don't express respect in the same way that some of us may see. So that means that they're going to skip their manager and go straight to the head, for example, or they're going to say some things in a way that they're not going to filter them. Okay, so they're going to be more direct, and they're going to not going to filter those things. Why? Because they're used to talking through social media, and they used to not filtering those things. So when they come to interactions, when it comes to interactions face to face, those they struggle to filter and articulate and communicate a few things in a way that will create a conversation and a relationship. But they care about people being honest. They don't care if you made a mistake. They don't care if our processes are not efficient, or we're not doing the right things the right way. They want to know that you're honest with them. This is not the best approach. We know it, but this is the way we have to work right now. They're going to respect that more, and they're going to respect you more for saying that, rather than trying to tell them that this is the way things are done and there's a reason behind that, you know? And they also want explanations and justifications. An important story that stuck with me is that recently, I think it was the US Army Forces, they had a story about trying to teach new Generation Z soldiers to navigate. Okay, so they were trying to tell them how to navigate with a combat. Yeah, I think I'm saying that correctly. With a compact instead of the GPS. So the Generation Z soldiers were not listening to them, and they were really not seeing the value in learning to use this old-fashioned thing that just tells you where you have to go, since you have GPS and a lot of other ways that you can learn. Now, that with that being said, we're talking about the US Army now. So there's no questioning things, there's no explaining, there's this is how you have to do it, or there will be consequences. No matter the consequences, the Generation Z soldiers kept fighting back. So what happened is that a US Army marshal came down, sat one of them down and told them, "Okay, what's your problem with this lesson? Why are you refusing this?" And then the soldier explained, "It's because these are outdated things. We don't understand why we're doing them. We have GPS. We're at the point of AI and technology and all of those systems. We're the US Army and blah, 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 blah." So the US Marshal turns to him and tells him, "And what happens when those don't work? Or what happens when those are hacked?" And the Gen Z soldier was like, I don't know. Okay. So he just didn't have anything to say back. And the US Marshal was like, "Yeah, but that's like, it should be clear to you that, they may not work, or they may hack us." Like, it's very logical. To the US Marshal, it was very logical that was the explanation of why they were doing this. To the Generation Z soldier that has grown up with technology and a phone, it wasn't clear. It wasn't logical. It wasn't, he didn't assume that that's the case. And after that, they communicated to the rest of the Gen Z soldiers this explanation of, well, you're learning this because it's important if we get hacked or if we don't have the GPS anymore, that you're able to navigate and see the threat. And right after that, all the Gen Z soldiers fell into the line and learned every single thing they had to learn about that particular thing, which they were resisting up until the point of explanation. So it's very, very important and it's very clear for Generation Z that you need to have an explanation of why things are done the way they're done. Now, with all of these things being said, um, I just wanted to show you this as well. This is from the Work Reimagined survey that EY runs across the globe. And they ran that and they asked employees from different generations. This is the 2023, I think, survey. No, I think it's the 2024 survey of the EY Work Reimagined, where they asked the different generations to tell them what they value more in terms of rewards. And as you can see, the color, there's a color coding so you can see better. But as you can see, paid time off is at the top of the Generation Z priority. It's not that far off for the other generations, but it is quite, it is definitely a change in terms of what they want. And you can see some other things that are different as well. But also the big changes are not that different. So you can see a lot of similarities between the other generations and what they wanted. And that's why I told you before that um, a very big difference is the way that Generation Z is demanding for these things and is not taking no for an answer, which is the reason why some of these things are being shaped. And then just this, what you're seeing here, the employer planned enhancements is where employers believed they should focus on. And they're not far off either. Um, but generations that really, really appreciates paid time off because to them, um, it's very important to have the time to do the things that you want, to have more vacation days, to be able to not feel trapped in a job. So all of those things are very, very important to them, which is why they put it at number one. Now, I'm just going to skip this. These are just some as well very interesting data. So, top values for Gen Z, as I said before, they have the fair pay that they want. And in terms of rewards, is the paid leave, which is what we've already seen. Now, they don't, as I said, they don't want anything different than what we all want. They're just asking for it in a very different manner than before. They want people to respect their personal time. They expect vacations and time off. They want realistic deadlines. They want to feel and they feel partially or completely burned out at work. Now 64% of them feels that. There's data for millennials and the other generations as well. Now they're burned out too. So we see data and trends of other generation being stressed and burned out too. And the reason is that the levels of productivity have not been raised in a way that's healthy for the workforce at the moment. What do I mean? I mean that we have the technology and we have the ability to produce more, but the need for us to produce more than we used to is bigger than our ability and the ability of technology to catch up and help us perform and produce quicker. So while the needs are increasing and the desire for and the demand for more production has been increasing, the question here is whether technology can move fast enough to help us adjust to that increased demand, um, not whether technology will replace us. Because right now technology needs to catch up, to help us produce by taking repetitive tasks, by eliminating tasks that are what you may have called donkey work, and all of those things that we're facing in our everyday lives. So we can focus more on the creative work, on the work that needs more of your cognitive processing power, and so on. Also, 1 out of 4 Gen Zs have already been let go from a job in their young careers. Again, these are data from 2025 on the work and play report that EY has conducted globally again. 1 out of 4 Gen Zs have already been let go from a job in their young careers. However, more than half are not worried. They are not worried about losing their jobs. Now, if you compare that to other generations, the worry is different. Why are they not worried? Because they know they have other options and they care about what I told you before, employability. So they care about skills that are transferable. They care about um, they care about learning. They care about the rewards they can get. Okay, one of the reasons somebody could argue is also because of their age. Okay, so many of them don't have kids yet, but they will start, and that we don't know if that will create the shift in the data that we are seeing, because of course that plays a role in not being worried about losing a job because you have other options. Now I'm just going to switch back to Streamio just to see if there's anything in terms of the Gen AI, the Generation Z before I go back to the last part. Okay, okay. I don't see anything. Thank you, Donna. Thank you very much. They're very interesting for me too. Okay, great. So I'm going to very quickly go back to my presentation to do the last part. Okay, so now the last part we're going to see is what about AI? So we've talked about the demographic changes. We've talked about skills of the future and how the jobs are changing. We've talked about the new generation coming in. Now, the pressing and trending matter of them all is about AI. As a people consultant, I'm not going to talk to you about the technicalities of AI. I'm going to talk to you about how it's changing the workforce. Now, here are some very interesting data. Again, these are from 2026, I think, or 2025, end of 2025. We are seeing a lot of people use AI. Okay. And as it says, the great race of AI is on. And I think a technology consultant from my firm the other day told me that AI is like a train. You either get on it now or you lose it. And I think that what he meant by that is that we need to learn AI, how to use it, how to get better. Because as I've told you, it's not about whether technology would replace us, it's whether it can move fast enough to replace the repetitive tasks so we have time for the cognitive and the people related things of our job so we can produce more, which is what the demand is asking. And so we can enjoy more of our work. Now, 88% of employees now use AI at work. So if I asked you, and if I did a poll, which I usually do if I have more time, I would ask you how many of you use AI at your work currently. And I use it 100%. And then we have a couple of data here for you. We see a report of 8 hours median reported time saving each week. So we see you save 8 hours per week currently if you're using an AI solution at work. That could be ChatGPT, that could be Copilot, or any other applications. Uh, and think if you're saving 8 hours per week, what you can do with those 8 hours. And we're just getting started. So you're going to see things like agents getting into the conversation. So what are agents and agentic AI? Now, agentic AI is basically your own personalized agent. Think like your own personalized colleague who is trained through processes and data that you're giving it to do a very particular specific job. Now, what could that job be? We were recently doing, and I'm talking about personal experience as well. We were recently designing agents for clients, and we were trying to identify what would be the best case for them. And they decided that they want their agent to do filing. So we designed an agent that does filing. Okay. Now, the agent got the information. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. And it saved time for their employees because it was doing the filing for them. Now, those employees use that time to do other things that were very, very important. For example, nobody ever informed the team about how the folders were, what information they could find in the different folders. So the people that saved the time from filing, because now the agent was doing that, used it to train other people on where things are, how can you find them, how we would like you guys to kind of file your things, and all of those things, which save them even more time. But they spend their time in creating training decks and talking to people and finding the way to convey their message instead of filing. So that presents a very interesting conversation of what if we can do the interesting parts of our work? What if we can involve to do those interesting parts of our work? And as you see, employees are mainly using AI for basic tasks. So searching for information, summarizing documents, drafting emails. There's also translating. There's filing. There's every repetitive task that you can think. Um, can probably AI can help you do it. And there are far less employees who are using AI to conduct deep research, coaching or mentoring, or evaluating decision. Now, something very important, since we are again at Coaching Minds, doesn't mean that it replaces your coach. It just means that it helps you on your everyday life as addition to a coach. Okay, it doesn't replace the importance of having a coach and a mentor, and it cannot replace that. Okay, I've showed you already how the human elements are what matters. Now, what's very important is that 95% of organizations who have invested in AI um, report no measurable return. So we're all putting that money in, but we haven't seen a return on investment. And the reason for that is because we're not doing it right. We haven't trained our people on how they can use it. We haven't trained ourselves, and we haven't identified the best cases. Okay, we shouldn't, and we and it's not effective and efficient to use AI for anything. For everything. You need to identify where those repetitive tasks are and where it can give you the most value, so you can focus on the creative and interesting parts of your work. Now, because we're coming to an end, I just want to mention a couple of things that keep me up at night, or a couple of questions that I have. Um, so we have entry level jobs disappearing. What does that mean? It means that since copy pasting, translating, CV making, all of those things are disappearing because they're being replaced by AI. It means that people on the entry level will need to have critical thinking, curiosity, empathy, and they will need to be able to apply skills and be able to do higher level jobs. Now, how are we going to train them? How are we going uh, to have those people who come in the entry level jobs do higher level jobs and use all of those skills to develop reports instead of doing the CV of a report, or the front page of a report, but using AI and also being able to communicate that to the client. So how are these entry level jobs look, and how should we reshape the way we onboard people and prepare them? Should I send my kids to university or encourage them to acquire and compile micro credentials? Another question. I don't know what's going to happen when I have kids. But it's a question that I have, and many people do as well, as we see the future of work changing and seeing the value of the university degrees. Have I prepared myself for what's next by investing properly and concurrently in my learning and the career I have chosen? And also, how do I need to evolve to make sure I'm ready for tomorrow and I can enjoy the benefits of the new era? Now, you can see AI and the future of work as a threat to your job, but if you evolve with your job and if you evolve with your careers and focus on the soft skills and the people elements, then you don't have to be worried about being replaced if you evolve. And that's why the number one skill that I will tell you happens is the ability to learn. The number one skill, the ability to learn and adapt. because that's going to be the most important thing in the future. And I'm going to close with the quote by Henry Ford that if you always do what you always done, you will always be who you've always been. So the change is here. It's up to us how and where we're going to do it. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for being today with me. I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope you learned something and you kept something. Sorry if it felt a bit rushed. I just had to make sure that you got the main points out of it. And thank you so much for being here today with me.